And here we have Star Force. This is a port of Tekken's 1985 arcade game, also known as Mega Force. As you can see, this game is a vertical shooter. Now, Star Force was actually developed by Tekken themselves, a company that would later change its name to Temco. This game was actually published by Hudson Soft, however. We'll take a look at the original arcade version. As you can see, the Famicom actually does a pretty good job of replicating the arcade graphics. The game also plays and feels quite a bit like the arcade version. We'll go back now to the Famicom. At the time this game was released, Temco was not yet a Famicom licensee, so they couldn't release this game themselves. So apparently they actually went with Hudson Soft to actually release this game. Now, Temco is one of those companies that's been around in some capacity for quite a while, but didn't actually start developing video games until around 1981. Of course, they're still around today. They're behind such games as Ninja Gaiden and the Dead or Alive series. So Star Force falls very much into the school of post-Xevious shoot-'em-ups. The game is pretty simple. You really only have one weapon, some sort of laser cannon. Not too much along the way of power-ups here. There actually is a way you can make your ship more powerful. We'll actually see that right here. But there really aren't any of those special weapons power-ups like you would normally expect to have of later shooters, no mega bombs or anything like that. Back in 1984, shooters didn't really have much of those kind of things. However, there is something sort of like an end-of-level boss. At the end of each level, you actually have to destroy a target, even though it's not really difficult. So as far as old-school shoot-'em-ups go, yeah, I'd say Star Force is a pretty good game. Once you've dealt with this boss-like creature, you'll move on to the next level, and then it sort of repeats forever. Or so I would assume if you actually played the game all the way through. As usual, you get more difficult enemies in later levels. For example, these little things shoot all kinds of crazy bullets at you. So the game controls pretty well. It's reasonably fun, fast-paced, certainly a lot better than the two shooters that Galaga released earlier in the year. I've heard this game was actually pretty successful in Japan, not so much in the US, even though it was actually released in the US. A lot of these early Famicom games weren't. We'll take a look at the US version in just a second. You know, it's interesting, this game actually does get relatively hectic for a shooter of this early vintage, much more so than, say, Xevious. Xevious was much more sedate. Of course, this game is not actually as good as Xevious, but it does play quite a bit different. We'll look at the American version here. The graphics actually are a little different. A few things have been changed, apparently. Nothing too major, however. So I guess we'll say, as far as old-school shoot-'em-ups go, Star Force is actually a pretty decent game.